Welcome to New York Truck Stop video. I am Zach Miller, host of New York Truck Stop Radio on AM 970 The Answer and AM 570 The Mission on Saturdays, as well as the publisher of NewYorkTruckStop.com.
And I'm Arthur Miller, and I don't see me, so I don't know if you see both of us. This is all new to me.
Yes, we are. Obviously, we, like everybody else, is shifting to Zoom for the next couple of weeks. So we are novices in this, but that's okay. We're still going to provide you with plenty of entertainment and information. So don't you worry about the exact video links.
So anyway, this is our first first show here on via Zoom. So we host NewYorkTruckStop.com and New York Truck Stop Radio, as Zach said, and we work with the trucking industry in and around the New York metro area. And I'm an attorney, and I handle tickets, traffic tickets, parking tickets, all sorts of violations in New York City and the surrounding areas. And I work with trucking companies, large and small. We help with DOT issues, but we also talk about transportation issues and commerce and all sorts of things here in the New York area.
Yeah, we like to call ourselves the voice of small business because, small businesses are heavily reliant on trucks. There's that symbiotic relationship between what a small business needs and who delivers it, via freight or service calls, whatever it is, they're all intertwined. So that's why we like to talk about transportation policy and commerce. Now, obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic spreading through the country and certainly a major hotspot here in New York City.
We're at ground zero.
We are. And unfortunately, commerce has taken a major hit due to this. Small businesses have had to close their doors. There is a lot of relief programs available, but who knows? Who knows if companies will be able to come back from this? It's a very scary time. It is a great unknown. Certainly we are very proud to be members of the trucking industry, because the trucking industry has really showed their mettle during this crisis. They always do during times of crises, but especially during this crisis, to keep food on the shelves, to deliver to pharmacies, to deliver to hospitals, to make sure consumers still have the goods that they need to weather out this terrible storm. But to that end, and one of the reasons why Arthur and I wanted to hit this video is because we're still seeing a lot of talk from think tanks and advocates about why we still need congestion pricing. Now, Arthur and I and New York Truck Stop has always been against congestion pricing. And for those of you who don't know, congestion pricing is basically they're going to set up tolling gantries around 60th Street in Manhattan, and any vehicle that crosses that barrier is going to have to pay a toll. This money is dedicated to the woefully mismanaged MTA. And the theory that was used to sell this is, okay, by creating this toll, we will discourage people from driving into the central core of Manhattan. Here's the problem, though. The central core of Manhattan, until this pandemic, is one of the least enjoyable places to drive into. Nobody is driving in there because they want to. The only people who drive in there are people who drive in because they have to. Largely commercial vehicles. So this was a tax that was going to fall heavily on the trucking industry. Fast forward to today, the streets are completely empty. Congestion has overnight evaporated. Obviously, there are still trucks on the road, thankfully, making these deliveries. And you really have to question, why are people pushing for a tax now? A tax that will fall heaviest on an industry that's having a lot of difficulties. Yes, there are still some trucks on the road. Yes, there are still deliveries being made, but a lot of trucks are sitting idle. A lot of companies, just like your small business, a lot of trucking companies are worried about making their next month's bills. Same thing with the small businesses they deliver to. Who knows when they're going to open? Commercial Midtown, when is that going to come back online?
Right. I mean,
No?
that really, sort of the root of the problem was that, the selling point of this was that we need tolls to try to restrict traffic. And then we can use the money from the tolls to support the subway system, the subway and transit system in the New York area. Now that commerce has largely evaporated,
Mm-hmm.
the only ones who are coming in pretty much are those that still have to make deliveries. And if businesses have closed, and particularly restaurants and small business owners and things like that, it's going to take a lot. They're on they're operating on fumes if they're operating at all, or they're shuttered.
Uh-huh.
It's going to take a lot to bring them back. So some of the proponents are still saying, don't give up on congestion pricing, because when the economy comes roaring back, we'll be able to make that money and use it, and we should continue to try to hold back on traffic. But the reality is, if a business is on fumes or trying to reopen, and they're going to have to restock, or they're going to have to work through slowly to try to rebuild their business, why would you throw an extra tax on that now?
It's really abhorrent because, like you say, I mean, the best case scenario is what? Maybe it's only going to be 2 months of these companies not getting any revenue. To be able to come back from that is going to take just a monumental effort. They can't incur another cent in new taxes for who knows how long, a year, 2 years. It's hard to predict, but it's certainly ridiculous to open up, try and get back on your feet, and then get slapped with all these new layers of taxation. And there's something else too, because and this is sort of unfortunate to say, but it is true. Midtown Manhattan is not coming back anytime soon. That business model is completely changed. We're seeing a whole new business model grow during this pandemic, from a shift from business to business deliveries to business to consumer deliveries. And a lot of consumers are getting comfortable ordering more to their homes. We know e-commerce was always on the rise, but this really accelerated that. And also less people saying, hold on a second, why am I paying a fortune to rent out office space in Midtown Manhattan when I could do this virtually, at no cost?
And let's face it, many of the people, we're talking about higher end jobs and things that did lend themselves to virtual businesses. In other words, working from home. Those people are not coming back so fast. And the demographics of Manhattan south of 60th Street is a good reason why a majority of New York City's COVID deaths and infections is not in that central business district. It's because the workers and the people who have to keep serving those businesses don't live there and are not coming from there. So especially if you've had a large percentage of businesses or residents who could afford and had the places to go and go elsewhere have left, they're not coming back so fast. So nobody's going to flip the switch and say, okay, restaurants, you can open again. All those people and those businesses aren't coming back so fast. You will still have the workers who have to come and clean things out and fix the plumbing and help stock the shelves and things like that. But the actual paying customers, they're not coming back so fast. And keep that in mind. What the concept that we, because of the traffic to that area, we need to tax them, I think, at least for the foreseeable future, falls flat.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, let's at least see if any of this traffic comes back before we talk about taxing it. And just something else. There's also this nonsense argument that, well, sure, trucks would have to pay a higher rate of this, congestion fee, but it would benefit them because it would get, more cars off the road. First of all, trucks already pay a fortune on slim margins. I mean, it costs about $15,000 per truck just in fees and taxes
each year.
each year doesn't include tolls, doesn't include parking tickets or any other, moving violations or anything like that. So that's already a fortune per truck. Again, they generally operate on thin margins, which, given this current pandemic, has been decimated. And the money, why? I never understood this. In what sort of person in their right mind would trust the MTA to properly manage and allocate funds? They have failed to do this for the last, 30 years?
Yeah,
25 years?
It's an unaccountable, mismanaged agency. And if I can, let's, to focus on it. And in fact, we did, I don't know, a year and a half ago, we did a report called the 10 Lies of Congestion Pricing, which is on our website, NewYorkTruckStop.com. But one of the things is that the notion behind congestion pricing was that the proponents were saying, if we could tax cars and trucks, we'll make something like $1 billion and a half a year. Now, from that billion and a half a year, they're saying, look, that's money that we could use to support the subways and mass transit. But first of all, tolling is notoriously inefficient. About 30% of the cost of any tolls goes to running the tolls. So that's number one. Number two, what they were going to do is look to take that money and then with the money, in other words, new lending, which would be in the form of bonds, and they were going to borrow like up to another $15 billion, which would be funny money that they could then, in theory, use for the subways. So there, of course, when you borrow, there's interest costs, and now interest, of course, is in the toilet temporarily, so I guess it's a good time to borrow, but there are interest costs, and there are fees that go to the investment bankers that package these bonds and the attorneys that do the closings and things like that. So it was never $1 at the toll is going to go $1 to the subway. Now, in the last budget that was pushed through the state legislature at the first week in April in Albany, under the COVID emergency, that when congestion pricing comes into play, the governor can use that money for basically anything. So what we have now is a scheme. It's another tax revenue that's going to basically fall upon the people who have no other options to get in and out of Manhattan's central business district. So why would you basically tax the people and the businesses who largely live in Queens and Brooklyn? And before I forget, one of our objections was that the way the congestion pricing was structured is that if you come from New Jersey under the either of the Hudson River tunnels, you won't pay extra toll to go into the Midtown area. Why? Well, they said the people from New Jersey were already paying enough to the Port Authority. But if the people from New Jersey, if the money is supposed to be used to support the subways, if the good people from New Jersey are coming in and are supposed to, and then get to ride the subways without paying extra for it, that's not particularly fair to the people of Queens and Brooklyn, who would have to pay for the privilege of going into Manhattan. So that's also one of our objections. And I think at the very least, congestion pricing needs to go back to the drawing board.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
And then also where we're at right now, of course, is that there were no rates set. Zach talked about, there was previous talk about taxing trucks at up to something like $26 a trip. But the legislature, when they approved congestion pricing last year, 2019, the budget that was approved in 2019, what they did was they just said, they basically approved the concept. And the concept, as they approved, was they budgeted money to put up tolling gantries across 60th Street and at the 3 East River bridges that go between Brooklyn and Manhattan and Queens and Manhattan. So they gave cover to the elected, to the legislature, by saying that the actual rates would be decided by some special panel, which was supposed to be appointed by the governor, and then, which was to be after the election in 2020 this year. And then in a short window of time, then the MTA was supposed to approve or disapprove whatever rates that panel suggested. So there's nothing fixed on the actual amount of the toll. So you have to be very skeptical of the notion of congestion pricing as it was proposed is basically a new taxing scheme that falls most heavily on the businesses and residents of Long Island, Queens, Brooklyn to get in and out of Manhattan, and that the rate is not yet set. And our concern, so particularly working with the trucking industry, is when they were first talking about ideas that they were saying that they would make those rates higher on the commercial vehicles. So one thing we like to talk about on our radio show and on the website is who's a trucking company. A trucking company can be somebody who, let's say, bakes muffins and drops them off at your local deli. So they may think of themselves as a baker, but if they have to pay tolls and taxes the way any commercial vehicle must, they're still a trucking company. So we're very concerned about that. We're not just talking about fleets of tractor trailers that make deliveries or a big delivery company. It could be a plumber could have a commercial vehicle because they need the tools in there to come and fix the plumbing in your building. So if you're going to tax them up to an extra $26 to come in and come in and fix your pipes, and at the same time the parking tickets are being issued and things in that, guess what they're going to have to do? They're going to have to raise the cost at your building or your small business. So again, in this economic disaster that is coming from this pandemic, why would we want to increase the costs for those that are trying to get back on their feet? And I think that's something everybody needs to pay attention to. Absolutely.
And this is just, because congestion pricing, the shell of congestion pricing, again, without the rates, but the shell has already passed. But this is something you have to be on the lookout for going forward, because cities and states are broke now. I mean, they always played games with their books and their budgets and all that, but now with this pandemic, they're broke. So they're going to have to find a way to raise revenue. Maybe they'll make cuts. I don't know. Governor Cuomo talked about making cuts, but the point is that they're going to look for ways to sneak taxes by you. And you, the consumer, you, the small business owner, cannot let that happen. You cannot let them get away with that. We have to be able to have the economy come back and recover. And these nickel and dime taxes will never let that happen.
Right, and keep in mind again, it's you have to look at who was pushing this to begin with. It was largely the big groups like the large business groups and the real estate developers and the investment bankers that were pushing this. Why? Because certainly, obviously, the investment bankers would make money from selling the bonds and structuring this thing. But you had the real estate industry that if they could do with less traffic, that means a couple things. One is that they wouldn't be required to put in so much parking, which means that if they could put in less parking, they could have more space to sell, basically, or rent out. But also that they're not responsible. If in other words, if they can get cars and trucks to pay for the subways and then they add density, they don't have to kick in for the density that they cause. And the worst case, of course, is in the outer boroughs. They're putting in density like crazy, and they're getting tax breaks under the renewed 421A program of something like $4 billion $4 billion a year to build more density. So in other words, if they're increasing the numbers of people that have to use mass transit and they're getting tax breaks for the privilege, and do the math, $4 billion a year versus the claim that they were going to collect $1 billion a year out of tolls, I think it's a bigger break for the real estate industry. And they're the ones that are causing the congestion without taking any responsibility for the congestion that they're causing. And I think that's reprehensible. And we have to really hold everybody accountable, especially it's going to be a new world after this coronavirus, and really everything has to be on the table. And let's face it, the affordable housing is when they knock down places that are low income, and they drive out small businesses that employ the low income and put in these expensive high rises. It's only a very small percentage of affordable housing that's available. The rest of it is like, many thousands of dollars of pricing where they get tax breaks, tax abatements for something like 25 years. That's crazy. I'd like a 25-year tax abatement on my house. So, again, we have to say really, what's fair, and we have to start thinking about what's really going to rebuild our city. Everything's got to be on the table.
Well, but there are two important points before we go. One is we're seeing the dear price that we're paying for the density, because the density is leading to more and more cases of the virus. So it's been literally a deadly game that they were playing. And the other thing is we're seeing the cost of getting rid of light manufacturing and putting in luxury high-rise buildings, because we're in desperate need of manufacturing right now. We don't have enough PPEs for the doctor. I know ventilators are more complicated, but how many places could have easily put together some of these PPEs that are desperately needed, but they were kicked out in favor of luxury buildings that sit partially vacant because people can't even afford them.
And we have to add to that too, why the shortage of hospital space in many areas.
Great point.
Certainly in Manhattan, we lost St. Vincent's and some other places, and in Queens and Brooklyn, there are also losses of hospitals and why were they lost? Because the economics were such that it was better to develop those properties for housing, especially higher income housing, than to keep it as a hospital, to keep it in reserve. And now we have to scramble to put in hospitals in the park and in the tennis stadium and the Javits Center, all at great cost. Having some degree of backup in a city that's rather unique, where we have a much higher population density than I think any other city in the U.S. I think was very short-sighted, and to ask people who drive cars and commercial vehicles to have to pay for those sins is shameful, and really needs to be revisited. And more shameful are those that continually advocate against cars and trucks and say, gee, it's wonderful that the streets are so empty. I don't think we want to enshrine that emptiness, because the emptiness is a symptom of the pandemic. We need commerce, and if there's a way to do the commerce where people can park their cars and trucks can make deliveries without getting ticketed and taxed every time they just pull up to some place, we'd love to hear it. But unfortunately, when trucks in particular are viewed as cash cows, that's not going to help commerce any. No, not at all. And it's certainly not going to help the city recover. No. So we ask, we're doing this, obviously we're concerned. There's a lot that's going to be in play, but keep your eyes open. Those that are, that keep pushing for congestion pricing, they've got they've got an interest that they want to push. And we hope that all of our listeners and all New Yorkers keep their eyes open. Fix the subways indeed, but let's not forget also, and the idea of this money was going to be used to help the subways. Even before the pandemic, all of a sudden, how were they going to fix the subways? They were going to continue the Second Avenue subway, which does not help much of the outer boroughs, and they were looking to cut bus service in the outer boroughs, and that was before the pandemic. So now, after the pandemic, there's not going to be money for the Second Avenue subway, and they're still going to be looking for service cuts. That money's going to go into the general fund or whatever else. So you really have to stop and say, who is it fair to tax, and why are you taxing it, and will those taxes have a negative impact on regrowing our economy and moving ahead? So please keep your eyes open and your mind open as you read any of these stories that hit the mass media. Absolutely. And get in touch. You could send us an email, Zach, Z-A-C-H, at NewYorkTruckStop.com, Arthur at NewYorkTruckStop.com. You could give us a call, 718
718-997-0641. That's 718-997-0641. We'd love to hear from you. And, we look forward to producing more of these quarantine-esque videos.
Right, and definitely, listen to our radio show, and it's on SoundCloud on our website. We've got the link, and of course, what Zach didn't mention is if you have any questions or things you'd like us to discuss, please, feel free. We hope to address relevant questions.
And a couple of irrelevant ones.
Ones. I was giving you the entree there.
Well, you gotta throw the curveball every now and then. Stay safe, guys. Stay healthy. We'll see you next time.